Once upon a time, there was a young man named David who lived in a small village near the foot of the mountains. After his father passed away, David inherited a small piece of land to survive and farm on. But unlike the fertile fields owned by the other villagers, David's land was covered with rocks of every size. The soil was hard, difficult to plow, and nearly impossible to cultivate. People in the village often looked at him with pity and said that his father had left him a useless piece of land. Every day, David worked as hard as he could. He carried his plow to the field and planted seeds with the hope of growing a good harvest. But everything always failed. His plow constantly hit the rocks and broke apart. The seeds he planted could not grow because the ground was too dry and barren. After many failures, David slowly became hopeless. Whenever he saw other farmers with fertile land and green crops, David felt life was unfair. He often looked up at the sky and asked God why he had been given such difficult land. In his heart, those rocks felt like a curse that would make him suffer forever. But David did not know that the very rocks he hated were secretly preparing a miracle for his future. That year became harder than ever for David. No matter how much effort he gave, he still could not make his rocky land produce crops. Every morning, he woke up early carrying a small hope that things might improve. But whenever the plow struck the hard stones again, that hope quickly turned into disappointment. Some days he worked until exhaustion under the burning sun, yet all he saw was dry soil and seeds that refused to sprout. Meanwhile, the other farmers still had softer and more fertile land. This made David feel even more bitter about life. He began doubting himself and blaming his fate. Whenever he looked at the green fields of others, sadness and envy filled his heart. He wondered why he had to endure so much hardship. Then one day, disaster truly arrived. A terrible drought spread across the entire village for many months. No rain fell, the ground cracked from the heat, and crops slowly died. Even the village wells began drying up. People worried as their harvests disappeared before their eyes. David was just as afraid as everyone else. He thought this would be the end of his land. But deep inside, he refused to give up. Even in despair, David continued going to the field every single day because he believed that as long as there was hope, he had to keep trying. During the harshest days of the drought, while the whole village was drowning in hopelessness, David suddenly discovered something strange on his rocky land. One morning, while walking across the dry field, he noticed tiny drops of water trapped between the rocks. He was shocked because everywhere else the earth was cracked beneath the blazing sun. Curious, David knelt down and gently dug the soil between the stones with his hands. He could hardly believe his eyes when he realized the ground underneath was still moist. The rocks he had hated for so many years were actually holding moisture in the soil and preventing the water from evaporating under the heat of the sun. Without knowing it, those rocks had protected his land from becoming completely dry like the other fields. At that moment, a new hope was born inside David's heart. He began planting seeds into the small spaces between the rocks. Every day, he carefully watered them with the little moisture that remained. Even though the chances of success seemed very small, David refused to quit. As time passed, while the villagers' land slowly turned into deserts, tiny green sprouts began appearing in David's field. Small plants pushed their way up between the strong rocks. It was something no one in the village could have imagined. David stood silently looking at the first green sprouts with tears in his eyes. For the first time in his life, he realized that the things he once considered burdens were actually the very things saving his life. When harvest season arrived, the entire village was filled with sadness and disappointment. After months of drought, almost nothing remained to harvest. Crops had dried up, the soil had cracked, and farmers could only watch their hard work disappear. Everyone feared the future because they did not know how they would survive the difficult days ahead. But in the middle of that despair, David's field became a miracle that shocked everyone. Green plants were still growing strongly between the rocks. When people came closer, they could not believe their eyes. While every fertile field had died, the land once considered the worst in the village had produced the only surviving harvest. News quickly spread everywhere. Villagers rushed to David's field to witness the miracle for themselves. They asked him in amazement, "How were you able to grow crops during such a terrible drought?" David stood silently, staring at the rocks on his land, his eyes filled with emotion. At that moment, David finally understood a truth he had never seen before. The rocks he had hated for years were not a curse. They had preserved moisture in the soil, protected the roots from the burning heat, and helped the crops survive the drought. David felt deep regret for blaming God and hating his destiny. He realized that sometimes the things we see as hardships or misfortunes are actually silent preparations for greater challenges in the future. After the terrible drought, the story of David's rocky field spread quickly throughout the small village. People no longer looked at him with pity. Instead, they admired the young farmer once considered the unluckiest man in the village. Everyone wanted to know how his rocky land had saved his harvest while every fertile field had failed. One day, the village elder came to visit David. He slowly walked through the remaining green field after the drought and looked at David thoughtfully. After a long silence, he said, "My son, today you have learned a very valuable lesson. God does not always give us what we want, but He always gives us what we need." Those words deeply touched David. He remembered all the years he had spent blaming life, hating the rocks, and believing God had abandoned him. But now he understood that those hardships had actually saved him from disaster. Instead of keeping all the harvest for himself, David chose to share his food with the hungry villagers. He even helped the people who had once mocked and pitied him. Because of his kindness, the villagers respected him even more. From that day on, whenever someone complained about difficulties in life, David would take them to his rocky field. He would tell them that sometimes the very things causing us pain are quietly protecting us and preparing us for greater challenges ahead. After everything he had experienced, David slowly realized that the rocks in his field were not just ordinary stones. They were like the struggles and challenges everyone faces in life. At first, people often see problems with frustration and sadness. We think they exist only to block our path and make life harder. But sometimes, the things that exhaust us the most are actually making us stronger every day. David began sharing the lesson he had learned with others. He explained that he once hated his land because it was different from everyone else's. To him, the rocks were useless things that caused him to fail again and again. But when the drought came, he finally understood that those rocks had preserved water, protected his crops, and saved his life. From then on, David always reminded people not to complain too quickly about present hardships. Some struggles are not meant to destroy us, but to prepare us for the future. Lonely days may be teaching us strength. Failures may be helping us grow. Today's pain may actually protect us from even greater losses tomorrow. Life is not always easy or fair the way we expect. Everyone walks a different journey. Some people are given soft soil, while others must live with rocky land. But both have meaning in God's plan. David understood that the most important thing was not complaining about circumstances, but learning to trust that every hardship has a reason. Life is sometimes like a rocky field. There are days when we feel tired because we face too many struggles, failures, and pressures. We look at other people's lives and wonder why everything seems easier for them while we continue fighting difficult battles. Like David once did, many people believe the rocks in their lives are only burdens and misfortunes. But the truth is, not every hardship appears to destroy us. Sometimes they come to prepare us to become stronger for greater challenges ahead. Failures teach us patience. Pain helps us mature. Difficult days teach us to appreciate happiness when it finally arrives. David once blamed his rocky land. He believed God had treated him unfairly. Yet those very rocks saved his life during the terrible drought. If David's land had been soft and fertile like everyone else's, he might have lost everything too. This story reminds us not to give up simply because life is difficult right now. Today you may only see obstacles in front of you, but one day you may understand why they were placed in your path. Some things that feel painful today may later become the greatest blessings of your life. So do not compare your journey to someone else's. Keep trying, keep believing, and keep walking with hope. Because perhaps the rocks you carry today are quietly protecting you and guiding you toward a better future.